Welcome to another show. I am James Swanwick, founder of Swanwick and the James Swanwick Show podcast and the Alcohol-Free Lifestyle podcast, amongst other things. And today we're talking about how to stay positive and create positive change. And I am joined by Miss Dorothy Illson. How are you, Dorothy?
I'm good. How are you, James?
I'm doing so well. Thank you for being here. Dorothy is the founder of Needle's Eye Media, which is a full-service digital marketing agency. And she's also a fellow podcast host. She hosts Do Well and Do Good. And you're based in Chicago, right, Dorothy?
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about your life and who you are and what you do. And just, maybe just wrap that up in what does feeling good and staying positive mean to you? How important is that? I know it's stating the obvious, but what is your viewpoint or how you live your life of staying positive?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so we'll kind of start with today and then I'll take you backwards. So as you mentioned, I do run a digital marketing agency. Specifically, we do Facebook, Instagram, and Google paid traffic, primarily for digital product businesses. So, businesses that are really looking to scale their customer acquisition with paid traffic. So I got here in a very roundabout way. I actually went, all the way through school with a very kind of stereotypical idea of what a successful career would look like. Love the Swannies you just put on, by the way.
Yeah, I'm rocking the Swannies here for anyone who's listening. I just put on a pair of, it's a little bit of a fashion show as we're doing this, Dorothy.
Well, when I had you on Do Well and Do Good a long time ago, you were kind enough to send me a pair of Swannies, which I never get to wear because my fiance Jacob commandeered them about 2 days after they arrived, and he wears them constantly. So anyway, but yeah, so I really, like I said, had just a very kind of traditional view of what a successful career was going to look like. And so that kind of got me on the path of finance and accounting. Long story short, we can dive as far into this as you want. Definitely a lot of positive mindset stuff that comes with it. But 2 weeks after I graduated, I ended up giving up the accounting job that I'd worked so hard to get and went to go work for a startup instead. And that was really because I had, as cliche as it sounds, discovered personal development. And it really took me down a radically different path. Worked at a startup here in Chicago for about 3 years after I graduated, and then started the agency. And now I'm blessed to work with some really incredible business owners, in helping to scale their paid traffic. So in terms of positive mindset, staying positive, I think we could dive into so many different areas. I would say the common thread along every single part of my journey has been relying on the strength of my mindset to push through, obstacles and to, ultimately continue along the path towards what I really wanted. And so that's certainly not to say that I am perfect at this. I think for all of us, it is a constant daily work in progress. But it is something that I believe is the number one key to achieving really anything that you're looking to go after.
There's a book named A Beautiful Constraint. Not sure if you've heard of it, by Adam Morgan and Mark Barden. And the book in a nutshell really talks about, overcoming obstacles or going around obstacles and the mindset that is required for that. Every cloud has a silver lining. When life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. Constraints, are assumed to be a bad thing, but in reality, they can often be the thing that creates momentum and creates breakthrough. So how have you, where has that shown up in your experience as an entrepreneur and as maybe as a wife, or maybe as just in your life and your health, where you've seen an obstacle and rather than even going around it or over it, you've actually changed the goal, like even made a bigger goal, because there's a way where you can overcome an obstacle to reach your goal, but then there's another process where you can actually just this challenge we got here is helping me create an even bigger goal.
Yeah. Well, so I'll take you back to after I had worked at this startup after graduating, and basically the co-founder of that business, who was really the reason I'd been there so long, he ended up leaving, and so I knew I wanted to leave too. And as I was kind of looking around at other jobs, I knew I didn't want something corporate. I wanted, somewhere that I would have the same level of flexibility that I'd enjoyed in my last job. So, I could work remote when I wanted to. I, had a lot of autonomy. And as I started, kind of interviewing places, I realized that it was going to be very difficult potentially for me to find that again. And so I kind of got this idea in my head. You mentioned you find a challenge and you ultimately start to dream bigger. I thought, well, what if I tried to do something on my own? And that was a scary thought, but it was an exciting thought at the same time. And so, basically I, went off on my own. I kind of thought, well, worst case scenario, if this doesn't work out, I'll go get a job. And hopefully we won't come to that. But after a few months, I was really floundering. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had made absolutely no money. I was renting out my apartment on Airbnb to pay the rent. And I was really close to reaching my breaking point of, having to kind of give up on this dream I'd created. And it was really a function of working even harder on my mindset than I was on trying to, figure out a business. Right. And as soon as I really focused on that, you start to see opportunities, where they didn't exist before. So basically, what happened for me was my old boss, he had a ticket to a workshop with, really an incredible Facebook marketer named Jason Hornung, and he couldn't go. So he offered me this ticket, and, I'd been involved in our paid traffic at that startup, but, starting an agency was really kind of not an idea on my radar. But I went to this workshop, and there, Jason was basically pitching this, $30,000 year-long coaching program for people building an agency. Now, I was not building an agency at that time. I didn't have $30,000. I didn't really have $1,000, but I believed in my ability to figure things out. And I believed in my ability to, take each challenge as it came and, and tackle it with that mindset that I mentioned. And so I ended up, putting that first payment for Jason's program on a credit card and just leapt without a parachute. And so I think, that experience, it really taught me a lot. I know you actually had kind of a similar experience with Ty Lopez and joining his program. And what I found was that putting my back against the wall, and then, like I said, working on a positive mindset equally as hard as I was working on the business, within just a few months, I'd, made back all the money I needed to pay for Jason and was kind of off and running building the business. So, I think it was just a lesson for me that, when we don't have certainty in the path, we can have certainty in ourselves. And that's really, all that it takes in most situations.
Yeah, well said. I like that. If we don't have certainty in the path, we can have certainty in ourselves. Yeah. 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 Similar to when I first invested in, as you mentioned it, with in Ty Lopez coaching back in 2013, I transferred 25,000 American dollars, which was 32,000 Australian dollars from my Australian bank account into his Bank of America account on October 31st, 2013. And, as we're recording this now in 2020, 7 years later, I've generated millions of dollars in revenue, and helped, my products have helped change many people's lives, obviously through quitting drinking and the Swannies blue light blocking glasses, helping people sleep better. And, I remember I had my father over actually just last night for dinner. And I remember 7 years ago when I told him that I was sending Ty Lopez $25,000, he said, "You're doing what? Who is this? Who is this Ty Lopez person? You're 25. What are you like?" He was shocked. And then it's funny because I had him over for dinner last night and I was like, oh, that investment worked out okay, I think,
I didn't tell my parents you had more guts than me.
Yeah. But it's true, isn't it? I mean, even now I'm actually been going through that again, like in the sense that I really want to build another brand. And there's a gentleman, Ryan Daniel Moran, who's um, wrote a fabulous book called 12 Months to $1 Million. He's been a friend of mine for a number of years, and he has a paid program that's coming up on how to build a brand and getting it ready for exit. And I've friends with him, and part of me is like ego kicks in, and it's kind of like, oh, I'm experienced enough now that I shouldn't have to pay for coaching. I should just like, I'm feeling a little bit embarrassed to actually even say to someone that I've known for 7 years and who I've built businesses with, oh, actually, can you help me? So that's so funny how the ego kicks in, even as we move along, even after having, success in business and things like that. For me, at least, my ego still gets in the way. I'm doing it. I'm enrolling in it, and I'm coughing up the cash to do it, even though, quite frankly, I don't need to. I'll do it. It might just take me a decade. Whereas if I do it this way with him and I pay for it, then I'm going to pay attention, and I might do it in like 2 years. So I think that's the same with anything. When you have a coach or a mentor and you put your back up against the wall, and some people may use the phrase, when you burn the ships, you give yourself no retreat. That's when you actually focus and get things done.
Yeah, I really couldn't agree more. I think you look at all of the free education that's out there that, we typically just don't take advantage of. The reality is that when you have skin in the game, when you pay for something, especially when you pay, that amount of money for something, it's definitely something that's going to light that fire under your ass to make things happen. So, I think you really put it perfectly that, it's not that you can't get to the same goal without help. It's that you're going to do it so much faster. So that's really, key.
Yeah, you're buying speed, aren't you? Or you're investing in speed. Tell us a little bit about your how you manage your time and your productivity. I'd love to know a day in the life of Dorothy, actually. Like what time do you wake up? What do you do? How do you spend your day? What do you do? What's your nighttime routine? Walk us through that.
Yeah. So part of the reason that I allowed Jacob to steal my Swannies is that he has a lot of trouble sleeping, and I have always been very skilled at sleeping. So, it's funny. Like I would say the one piece of my routine that I absolutely never skip is getting at least 8 hours of sleep, usually 9. I'm someone who just, I know that I function the best when I am well rested. I hardly ever drink, like like you say, is such a huge part of sleep. And so, I get a good night's sleep. I wake up usually at about 7 a.m. And then, I like to move my body first thing. So usually either a walk or a run, or if I'm doing a workout, I'll do that. Hydrate before that. I have celery juice every single morning. And then when I'm done with with whatever kind of movement I'm doing that day, then I meditate and I journal. And I think for me, it's the journaling piece that has been kind of the foundation of, my positivity practice, if you will. It's definitely the one thing where, if I feel like I am kind of in a rut or I haven't been moving forward, things aren't going well, I can just about always open up my journal and see, okay, I haven't done this for 2 weeks. Let's get back on track. So it's something that just has a dramatic impact on me. So that is, that's kind of my morning routine. Then, I usually then check in on Slack with my team, see how, all of our ad accounts are doing that day, what's going on with all of my clients. And then the rest of my day is usually filled with, calls with my clients, strategy sessions with my team, and really just making sure that we are executing for, everyone that we work with at the highest level possible. And then I usually wrap up the day around 6, 7 o'clock, and cook dinner and enjoy a quiet evening and go to bed early.
What time's early for you?
Honestly, I usually get in bed about 9:30, and I'll read for a little bit and go to sleep around 10 and wake up at 7. So I get my 9 hours.
Yeah. I've been experimenting with waking up a lot earlier and going to bed a lot earlier. So as early as 7:30, 8, and trying to get up around. I mean, this week I got up. The earliest I got up was 5:30, but I'm trying to see if I can get up at 5. Try and train myself to get up at 5. Because I'm in Australia at the moment with COVID-19 as we're recording this. A lot, and most of my business is in America. As soon as I wake up, I'm on, like, because it's already lunchtime there. And what I found for a couple of months during COVID-19 lockdowns was that my daily routine of writing in my gratitude diary and exercising and doing, like, trying to do 10 or 15 minutes of meditation and just, being intentional and writing and my vision for the future and stuff was getting pushed to the side because I was waking up and straight away I got calls and podcast interviews and meetings and things like that. So just this week, actually, I've been intentionally attempting to go to fall asleep sooner and wake up earlier and make sure that I don't compromise that kind of morning routine. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think self-awareness is so huge in absolutely everything. And so for me, I actually work with a hypnotherapist, and that has been life-changing. That's a whole other rabbit hole that we can go down if you want. But it was interesting. I was in a period where I was trying to do the same thing as you. I was saying, okay, if I'm going to be, a real entrepreneur, a good entrepreneur, I got to be getting up early, right? That's what they all say. So I was trying to, get myself to wake up at, 5:30, 5:45. And it wasn't going well, let's say that. And so in a conversation with my hypnotherapist, I was talking about this, and he was having me kind of describe my morning and my thought process. And what he realized was that every morning when I was waking up, the very first thing I was doing was beating myself up for snoozing my alarm till 6:15, or for not jumping out of bed at 5:30. And he kind of pointed this out to me. He's like, so you're starting every single day attacking yourself and talking down on yourself for not meeting this arbitrary standard that you set. So why don't you just decide that you have permission to go to sleep at 10 and wake up at 7, and that can be okay, right? And so I think for me, what I found was, that schedule really worked for me. And so I think there's so much power in just being self-aware. So like for you being in Australia, like you said, you need that extra time in the morning to be able to kind of get into things. Like for me, it's okay if I start work at, 10 a.m., because that's what works for me and my schedule. So it's all very individual, I think.
Yeah. I found that when I do, I have this, I wouldn't say it's a love-hate relationship with meditation. I would say I love meditation. It's just, I hate starting it. I hate beginning it. So when I'm doing it, I love it. But the actual process of sitting down and just closing my eyes and beginning, I have so much resistance all the time. And you're talking to someone who's done a 10-day silent meditation, Vipassana. Like I've done all that stuff. Anything that you have resistance to, anything that you have a lot of resistance to that is so damn good for you, but Dorothy's mind is just like, not today, don't want to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, definitely it's kind of the same answer. It's the meditation and the journaling, which is so funny because it is without question the thing that keeps me, on the right track in terms of my mindset and my thinking patterns. And it's not something that takes a lot of time. I mean, I certainly have more than half an hour in the day that I'm just wasting on, stupid stuff, whatever, social media. And so the fact that we can be so resistant to taking that time to do something that has a dramatic impact on our mental health and well-being is pretty shocking. So, I think that for me, it's traveling where things really go off the rails. So, obviously 2020 there hasn't been as much travel on my calendar. So it's really been a time where I've focused on solidifying my routine in a really powerful way, because I think when you turn it into something that is as routine as brushing your teeth, it becomes harder to to ignore it and let it go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how the human brain as well, I'm not sure if you find this, but when we first discover something new, we fall in love with it, right? And we want to tell everyone about it. It's like, oh, I've got this new book. You've got to read it. It's incredible. I was like, oh, I found this new thing and I'm doing this and it's incredible. Oh, guess what? I'm doing stretching. I'm doing meditation. It's been a game changer. And you hear this all the time. And I've been guilty of this all the time. You go charging over the hill 1,000,000 miles an hour, and then 2-3 weeks into it, the slippery slope starts to get you. And then week 4 or 5, you're in the drift. And then week 6 or 7, it's like, what was that thing I was doing again? And then you have to keep reminding yourself, coming back. So it's funny because I'm not that self-disciplined. I mean, I'm self-disciplined in many things, but I'm not self-disciplined in other things. But what I have surrendered to, I guess, is as long as I'm making progress, as long as I feel like I'm even if I'm not always consistent, as long as I feel like I'm making progress, I'm okay with that. And I used to beat myself up about it all the time. Like I should be doing better. I should be doing meditation. Or I should be making more money. Or I should be selling more things. And then I have to come back to, like Jordan Peterson, the famous Canadian psychologist, talks about it in his book, 12 Rules for Life. And he says, you always just got to compare yourself to you and your progress. And that makes me feel somewhat better when I wake up sometimes in the morning and I'm beating myself up.
Yeah. No, I think it's perspective, right? So you mentioned how important it is to feel like you're making progress. I read a book several years ago called Zen and the Art of Happiness by Chris Prentice. And it's a short book, a simple book, but basically it encourages you to operate under the premise that everything that happens to me is the best possible thing that could happen to me. And it's really interesting. I think all of us, if you look at events in your life, every single person listening to this, you can probably point to at least one thing that has happened to you that at the time felt devastating. It felt like an, unequivocal, negative event. This is a bad thing that happened. And then in hindsight, you realize that it was actually to your benefit. It led to something better, whatever it was, whether it was, a breakup, losing a job. And I had an experience like this when, I was in Jason's coaching program. I was in the very early days of building the agency. I was getting some traction, but, it was still a major grind. And my old boss came to me with an opportunity to work with him in the new company that, he had gotten involved in. And so this was a job in essence. They were like, you can have, some clients on the side, but, this was almost a full-time gig. And I jumped in. I thought, oh, this is great. This is going to be, stability, and I can still, whatever. I made all kinds of excuses for why it was the right move. And then about, a month, 6 weeks later, I lost the opportunity. They realized that, the business was so early on, like there were kind of too many cooks in the kitchen, and, and really my skills just overlapped 100% with one of the co-founders. And so, I basically, I lost that gig. And at the time it felt devastating. It felt like, this was going to be it. This was going to be an amazing opportunity for all of these reasons. And I was, really in a position where I had to choose to look at this as an opportunity. And even though at the time it felt so negative, losing something, that was really, it was, kicking out the crutch that I was leaning on to avoid actually building this business, and being on my own. And so, in hindsight, looking back, thank goodness that opportunity fell out from under me, because if it hadn't, I never would have, gotten to where I am now, and where I'm continuing to go, of building this business, of providing other people jobs, of, getting results for my clients, and really building something that I'm proud of and that I'm excited about. And so now I really try to look at everything that happens in that light of, how could this be the best thing that could happen for me? And when you start to ask yourself that question, your brain is going to search for answers. And so even in the darkest moments, the most scary situations, you can start to look for the opportunities, and looking is certainly the first step to finding them. So that's been really powerful for me.
Yeah. Tony Robbins says, if you want better results, ask yourself better questions.
Yeah.
It seems like, you want master results, ask yourself master questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. I want to geek out on some productivity tech stuff. I think what do you use? I think you use Asana, right? To put things in. Tell us a little bit about how you plan out your day, like for the entrepreneurs or the productivity geeks out there listening. What kind of to-do list do you have? How do you get things done? What tech are you using?
Yeah. Well, my whole life lives in Asana. So for a while, I would just have kind of work tasks in there. But what I found is that when I started to use Asana to track everything that I needed to do, like schedule a dentist appointment, it takes this mental burden off of you. So all of these things that you just have, in your head of like, I got to do X, Y, Z. I literally have a task in Asana twice a week for, call my grandmother. And it sounds kind of silly, but it is very freeing, at least for me, to know that I can just go into Asana every day. I break things out of, what I've got to do today, tomorrow, this week, next week. And so whenever I, realize like, okay, hey, I've got to schedule a dentist appointment in 6 months, I put it in Asana, mark that due date in 6 months, and I know that it's going to pop up on my to-do list when it needs to happen. And I don't have to worry about it. And so that has been very powerful for me. And I think one of the keys to productivity and staying positive for me is being realistic about what I can get done in a day. Because I think for a long time, especially when I first started the business, and especially when I was working alone and didn't have a team, I was just completely unrealistic about, what I was, assigning myself for any given day. And so inevitably, every single night, I would have to shut down the computer, leaving things undone. And so again, just like, not being able to wake up, jump out of bed at 5:30 in the morning, I was beating myself up at the end of every single workday. And it wasn't because I was not being productive or not working hard. It was because I was trying to fit 3 days worth of work into every single day. And so just being more realistic about what can happen, and then planning that so that, now I'm able to work my way through my tasks for the day. And then maybe I get started on, one of my tasks for tomorrow. And that leads to a much more positive, empowering mindset around work and productivity than the opposite.
Yeah, Tony Robbins, again, to quote him, says that we overestimate what we can achieve in a day and underestimate what we can achieve in a year, for example. So, or you could just change it to a month as well.
I've heard it 1 year and 5 years. I think it's true kind of no matter how you shake it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. Like, I'll set out at the beginning of a week and think, this is what I'm going to do this week. And no matter what, I'm going to get that done. And then all of a sudden stuff comes up and I'm like, oh, I've got to do that. I want to do that. That's good. Oh yeah, I got to do that. I'm going to add that to the list. And before you know it, it's like there's 100 different things on there. But I am the chasing the shiny new rabbit kind of guy. Like I like chasing. I actually do like chasing shiny new rabbits. It's just I haven't quite yet fully mastered the sequence with which I chase them. Because I think if I can master the sequence, then things will be a lot easier. And like you, probably wouldn't beat myself up so much for not seemingly getting things done. So we're talking about Needle's Eye Media as well. I'd love to know just a little bit more about that. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, Dorothy?
Yeah, absolutely. Really, what we do is, about 75% of our clients are selling digital products or services. So we work with a lot of personal brands, a lot of companies promoting things like your 30-day alcohol challenge, products like that. And our ideal client is someone who is, spending between $10,000 to $40,000 a month on paid traffic and is looking to scale to $100,000, $200,000 a month. And so, you mentioned my podcast is called Do Well and Do Good. Giving back is something that's really important to me. And so I really make it a priority to only work with businesses who I do feel are really doing something good in the world. And that really makes my work a lot more fulfilling. And so, I believe that paid traffic is really the best way to create leverage in your business, and really be able to kind of turn on the faucet when you're ready to really pour it on and scale your customer acquisition in a predictable way. And so that's really, what we help our clients to do.
Yeah, you can check out more at needleseyemedia.com, which is Dorothy's full service digital marketing agency. You mentioned before, I think I may have referred to you as a wife, but it's your fiance. Is that right? Did I?
Yes.
Yeah. So I stand corrected. I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself.
No worries.
But I'm sure your fiance is keen for you to be his wife. So,
well, he's going to have to wait a little longer now, thanks to our friend coronavirus.
Is that right? What's happened?
Well, we were supposed to get married September 19th, and we ended up moving it to October 2021, just so that we could be at least more confident that we can kind of have the celebration that we wanted to have. So honestly, it was stressful before we moved it. Now that it's done, I'm just glad we don't have to stress about it anymore.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You without actually even reading the book that I referenced before, like A Beautiful Constraint by Adam Morgan and Mark Burden, you've already changed the goal and you've already overcome the obstacle. So that's great. Well played.
Thank you. It's funny now, though, because of everyone moving their 2020 weddings to 2021, I'm going to have 7 next year. 1 is the maid of honor, 2 is the bridesmaid, and 1 is the bride. So.
Oh, wow. That's true. Because when all this dies down, COVID-19, there's going to be a flurry of weddings, aren't there?
Yes. My sister was very gracious in letting us move our wedding to 3 weeks after hers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Dorothy, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. I love the topic of staying positive and productivity and mindset and overcoming obstacles. And it's a testament to you that you've been able to handle all those things the way that you have. So thank you for your time.
Well, I definitely encourage anyone listening to reach out to me. I'd love to connect with you on Instagram, on Facebook, help you however I can. So, James, thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, you should wrestle those Swannies back from your fiance as well.
I should. I need to just buy a second pair so I can rock my own. I want those clear ones you got. They're so cool.
Thanks, Dorothy. Take care.
Thank you.